Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second series of Indonesia, Australia virtual campus-to-campus outreach program, hosted by Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia in collaboration with the Embassy of Australia in Indonesia. My name is Esther, Climate Director of FPCI, and I will be your moderator for today. To get us started, a virtual outreach program is a one-on-one discussion between university students from Australia and Indonesia, led by high-level speakers such as ambassadors, professors, or experts to lecture assigned topics relevant to the topic for each month. And for today's session, I am glad to greet student participants from Deakin University, Universitas Bosowa di Makassar, dan Universitas Mataram. Today's virtual outreach topic is on gender equality and women's empowerment, shared opportunities for Australia and Indonesia. And this is a very relevant topic in celebration of International Women's Day and Women's History Month. We will take on a broader view on gender equality and women's empowerment, considering challenges faced by Australia globally as well as in Indonesia, including in the political and socioeconomic sphere. This discussion will also be a great opportunity to reflect and celebrate our achievements and share insights on how Australia and Indonesia can continue to work together in achieving a gender equal future. Without further ado, let me first invite Ambassador Dino Jalal as Chairman and Founder of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia to open today's program.
Thank you very much, Esther. This is Dino Jalal, and I'm supposed to be in the studio at FPCI, but got stuck in traffic from Bandung. So I'm a bit late, and I decided to do this in the car. But I want to thank everybody who has tuned in. And the topic that we are discussing today is very important. We are here to celebrate International Women's Day and Women's History Month. And for me personally, I have long been an advocate of gender equality because I come from the Minangkabau ethnic group. Yeah, as you know, Minang is matriarchal society, and I have always grown in a household that were ruled by women. Right. In fact, in my father's and my mom's village, it is well known that it is women who propose to the men and offer dowries to the men when they marry, and it is the women who heads the household, who own the property, the farms. And I find what is interesting also in that Minang society, no matter what the political system in Indonesia,
It seems that we have lost Pak Dino, as I understand that he's joining us virtually on mobile. So in the meantime, we'll thank Pak Dino.
Really glad.
Okay. We have you back?
Yes.
Over to you, Pak.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I don't know how long you lost me, but I was talking about my ethnic background as a Minang, coming from Minang society, where it was matriarchal and almost everything was run and ruled by women. But the interesting thing is that Minang society had always been a democratic one because women were always fair, and there's a lot of wisdom in the way they govern their communities. So I think I'm really glad that we're discussing this topic of gender equality today, because we do have a lot of homework in Indonesia to advance the role of women in our society, and I'm glad that there's growing realization that women is the key to our success, to our prosperity, to our peace, to our democracy, and of course to our happiness. So with that, I'm glad that we have two amazing women. My most favorite woman Yeni Wahid, and also Penny Williams, Ambassador Penny Williams, who's an awesome diplomat and who I count as my good friend. And then Yeni also is, I've known her for a long time. She was a journalist in East Timor when I served there. And then I knew her when she was assisting her father, the president of Indonesia, the late Gus Dur. And now she is serving the country in so many different ways. But these are incredible, awesome, creative women of ideas and leadership. And I look forward to hearing what they have to say and share with all of us here. Thank you very much, Penny and Yeni. And I give the floor back to you. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you, Pak Dino, for joining us mobile despite the technical glitches. I think we heard very well about the importance of women's role in societies at the subnational level and even in cultural context. So without further ado, we have two esteemed speakers and women icons joining us today for this discussion. And although neither of them needs any introduction, allow me to briefly introduce them to you and our public who are joining from the YouTube live stream. First, we have Ambassador of Australia to Indonesia, Ambassador Penny Williams, who is a senior career officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and was recently Deputy Secretary of the department. She has previously served overseas as High Commissioner to Malaysia and was Australia's first ambassador for women and girls. Ambassador Williams is Australia's first woman ambassador to Indonesia. And then we also have Ibu Yeni Wahid, Director of Wahid Foundation. She is a social and political activist who works to promote peace and tolerance in the world. Her sphere of influence within Nahdlatul Ulama, the biggest Muslim organization with around 80 million members, enables her to work effectively on the grassroots level. Currently, she continues her work at the grassroots level, also trying to empower many marginalized women communities through her foundation, Wahid Foundation. So let me now give the floor first to Ambassador Williams for her presentation, and then later I will be giving the floor to Ibu Yeni Wahid for her following presentation. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, selamat siang. I'd like to begin by thanking Ambassador Dino Patijalal, Pak Dino, and the foreign policy community of Indonesia for hosting today's event, and also for their continued partnership with the Australian Embassy through this campus-to-campus virtual outreach event. I'd really like to welcome the students and future leaders of Australia and Indonesia joining us today. And I can't say how pleased I am to be on a panel once again with Ibu Yeni Wahid to talk about gender equality and women's empowerment. Earlier this month, we joined the Foreign Minister, Ibu Retno Marsudi, and Minister for Finance, Ibu Sri Mulyani, on a panel to share our experiences and insights on women in leadership. And I really valued Ibu Yeni's perspectives on the importance of investing in women, for the community, and for the economy. Women's empowerment is a topic that we're both very passionate about, and it's hard to get us to stick to our time limits. And I'm always interested in hearing more from Ibu Yeni, as we will today. Today's discussion being held to mark International Women's Day, but also Women's History Month, is really an important opportunity. I've said it throughout the month. It is an opportunity to reflect and to celebrate our achievements, and I believe there are many. But it's also an opportunity to share insights, to redouble our efforts to create a more gender equal future. As you've heard earlier in my career, before becoming Australia's ambassador to Indonesia, I had the honour of being Australia's first ambassador for women and girls. And this role was created by the Australian government to strengthen international advocacy, to empower women and girls, and to eradicate violence and discrimination. In this role, I just can't explain how privileged I was to meet so many remarkable women across the Indo-Pacific, and saw firsthand the work that they're been doing at the grassroots level and at the political level to increase women's participation in decision-making, to empower women economically, and to support women's safety. And a critical thing about that role was that I saw the challenges that we all face in Australia and globally to advance gender equality and to end violence against women and girls. It's not a role where Australia would go in and say, look, we've got it sorted, let us tell you a thing. This is a role where we have a conversation about the shared issues that we have, and potentially shared solutions. So before handing over to Ibu Yani, I'd like to say a few words to sort of set the scene on that topic, and with that perspective in mind of listening and sharing ideas about how we can benefit all of us. And that's the point, really, that very simply, gender equality benefits everyone. A gender equal world is a safer, secure, and more prosperous world for all of us. But unfortunately, gender equality is a long way away in Australia and in Indonesia and globally. Based on their 2021 Global Gender Gap Report, the World Economic Forum predicts that it's going to take us 135 years to achieve gender equality. The important thing to note from this is that it was actually 99.5 years under 100, but due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, it means that another generation will have to wait for gender parity. It also means that it's more important than ever that we have conversations like this, and we all think about how we can support positive change. For the Australian government, advancing gender equality and women's empowerment is a core priority. And when we think about progressing gender equality, there are three key areas that are interlinked. And it's important to recognise the relationship between all of them. You can't have solutions without taking account of all three of these: women's economic empowerment, women's participation in decision-making, and women's safety. And these areas are reflected in Australia's work at home, as well as in our region and internationally. So we work with the Indonesian government, both within Indonesia and together internationally and together in our region, to progress our shared commitment to gender equality. But I want to go through those three areas. So women's economic empowerment is important for women, for their families, and also for broader economic growth. In Australia, we have prioritised work to increase women's workforce participation and to narrow the gender pay gap. This means identifying the unique barriers that exist for women so that we can work to remove them. For example, through giving women and their families greater choice and flexibility to manage work and care. Can also mean access to affordable childcare and leave for mothers and fathers when their children are born. In Indonesia, through our development cooperation partnership, we work with business leaders and impact investors to improve women's economic participation as employees, but also as entrepreneurs. Small and medium businesses are an important source of livelihood for Indonesian women. And through our Investing in Women program, we support work to expand women's access to finance for small and medium enterprises. One of those really kind of killer factoids, the World Bank estimates that reducing the gap in female labour force participation by only 25% by 2025 would add $62 billion to Indonesia's economy. And on women's voice and participation in decision-making, the evidence shows that diverse teams produce stronger outcomes. This means more women in our parliaments and in leadership positions in the workplace and within communities. Improving diversity helps broaden the range of ideas, views that we bring to our work, and improves our ability to understand and respond to a fast-changing and very complex world. I know from my own ministry, the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, we've been really working hard to progress gender equality within our own workplace at senior levels in particular, so that we reflect Australian society, we reflect the population, but also to increase the diversity of views. So we have really worked hard to increase the numbers of women in senior positions and also as ambassadors. And while you heard I am the first woman Australian ambassador to Indonesia, I certainly won't be the last. There's also power in bringing women together to talk about the specific challenges that women face and to share experiences and ideas about how to overcome those problems. For example, the recent inaugural Southeast Asia Dialogue of Women Leaders, co-hosted by Australian Foreign Minister and Minister for Women Marise Payne and Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi, which was very recent and brought together women leaders from government, the private sector, civil society to share perspectives, challenges, policy approaches, and areas of cooperation on gender equality. It also serves to strengthen the network of women leaders in the region. Once again, it's about the conversation and sharing views and sharing experience so that we can all walk through this together. One area that's particularly important to me is women's safety, and it's critical that women and their children are safe from violence so they can participate fully in society. Ending violence against women and girls is a challenge throughout the world. We know that gender equality is the root cause of violence against women, and because of this, it's so important that we work with all members of society, including men and boys, to transform gendered social norms, attitudes, and behaviours. In Australia, we're considering women's safety in all aspects of life, in homes, communities, workplaces, and online. And the national government's working with regional governments to improve prevention as well as responses for survivors. In Indonesia, we support government and civil society organisations to improve the quality of and access to comprehensive essential services for survivors of violence. Indonesia has also made important progress in eliminating violence against women and girls. For example, the amended marriage law increases the minimum age for marriage and is accompanied by a national strategy on preventing child marriage. Australia also continues to support the Indonesian government and civil society to promote tolerance and to counter violent extremism, including supporting the Wahid Foundation's Peace Schools initiative under Ibu Yeni's leadership. But we've all got lots of work to do. We can't talk about gender equality without talking about the important role that all of us play, including men. Men have an important role to help foster inclusive societies. Through male leadership in government, the corporate sector, and non-government organisations, we can build a more gender responsive and just society where everyone has the opportunity to contribute and benefit equally. And when to give you an example in conclusion of how bringing women's leadership, economic empowerment and safety together, let me give you the example of a market where women bring in their products in the middle of the night or in the early morning that has no lighting, that has no toilets, and that women don't participate in the leadership committee of that market, so they get the worst stalls, which means that they're not able to have the advantages that others have, and they might not have access to microfinancing to actually purchase their goods. You can't solve the issue of those women's safety, their economic empowerment, or their political leadership without linking up those things. But if you can give them lights and toilets, and if you can give them an opportunity to participate, working with their male colleagues on the leadership committees, then you economically empower them, and thus you contribute to the economic empowerment of their family. So it is really worth thinking about things in that sort of completely sort of integrated. You've got to work on all three aspects of that. That's just a thought to leave you with, and I'm happy to answer questions when we get to that. So I would really like to thank, as I end my remarks and we hand over to Ibu Yeni, I'd like to thank the university partners for their support of today's event, University Besoa in Makassar, where I was very pleased to visit at the end of last year, Universitas Matram in Nusa Tenggara Barat, and Deakin University in Australia. And I really do hope forums like this can encourage all of us to have conversations about what we need to do to encourage women and girls everywhere to pursue their goals and reach their leadership potential, and that it will also inspire men to become allies as we build a more equal world. Semoga bermanfaat. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Williams. I was nodding my head along all throughout your speech. But before we pick on more detailed at the question and answer session, let me give the floor now to Ibu Yeni Wahid for her presentation.
Thank you so much, Esther. And, first of all, I'd like to apologize for the background noise. I'm sitting here in a restaurant in Abu Dhabi and just landed here along with my family. And so it's now breakfast time. And so I will, this is part of the, balancing between mom being a working person and also having to make sure that the kids are, eat proper food. So it's part of, being, it's a gender balancing act that I'm trying to do here. Anyway, so Pak Dino Patijalal, a good friend. Thank you very much for this invitation to join this esteemed event, and along with Ibu Penny Williams, whom I have the privilege of sharing a few sessions in the past few months. And it's always a pleasure to be with such great speakers, such as Pak Dino and Ibu Penny, and to learn from them a great deal about their thoughts that enlightens the society. And also the students from University of Gosowa, University Mataram, and Deakin University, Australia, and also ladies and gentlemen. I think what Ambassador William said before, I just want to highlight what she has mentioned before, some of the things that she said. It's about communication. I think that's really, really the gist of things that, really it's a fundamental strategy that we have to take when we are trying to overcome the challenges that faced the issue of women empowerment. So as we all know that there is still a patchy record when it comes to women empowerment, especially in Indonesia. On one hand, we've got all these great leaders, great women leaders in strategic positions, but on the other hand, we still see all these discriminations and lack of participations of women in many great sectors in our society. So, I mean, that one thing that really that is an example of that is actually the patchy image is actually when you look at the state of women involvement, especially in the area of extreme terrorism. In the past, women were just playing a part in the background, like the back role actions, such as being recruiters or fundraiser, or maybe doing some resource manager, being resource manager. But now we see that some of them are actually being perpetrators. So I don't really see that as a way to highlight a women empowerment, but you can see from there that when women are being empowered to do something, then it can embolden them to even take such a great leap and do something that has a great impact in the society. Another thing that women sometimes do not think that will have an impact is, many of their decision-making process, even the individual decision-making of women can have impact in the society. Take, for example, a woman's decision to get pregnant, for example. Maybe instinctively we might think that this is just a personal decision. This is about family. This is about, this is something that happens only at home, and it doesn't have an impact in the society, let alone the state. But if you look at the role that women are playing in the reproductive role, then you see that women actually plays a great deal of importance in making sure that there is a continuation of generations to come, through the act of reproduction. So if a woman, for example, decides not to have kids because she feels that having kids is just too much burden, she doesn't get supported, she doesn't get, she probably feels that, she has to choose between career and being a mother, for example. That could lead to a change, and then if she decides not to have kids as a result, then they could actually impact the whole demographic landscape. If women decides not to have kids, then what happens is that a society becomes older. When a society becomes older, it means that you have a less productive society, less people who would pay tax, and as a result, then you have a country that is not as prosperous as a country that probably has a productive, a big chunk of their societies being productive. So from that point of view, women's personal decision-making process can actually have a big impact on the society at large. So for me, if I look at women's pregnancy, for example, you cannot just see it as a personal decision. You have to look at it as an investment in the whole, from the whole nation. You know, you have to make sure that the mother is happy, that she's healthy, that she's thriving in her pregnancy, that she will produce great babies that will become, citizens that will contribute positively to the development of the country. So from that, we see that women actually plays a great role, much greater than what they can imagine themselves. But of course, women still face all these problems externally and also internally. So externally, we still have all these rules and regulations, the norms and cultural norms that puts a constraint to women being active in the society. But also internally, you still have these glass ceiling syndromes in which women feel that they are not good enough to to hold certain positions, for example. That's why figures like Ibu Penny actually plays a great role in the society, because she will inspire many young girls, to follow her footsteps. She made it possible that she became the first female ambassador to Indonesia. And Indonesia, as we all know, is plays a strategic position with Australia. So having the ambassador being a female leader here actually sends a big message to many great many of the students and many of the young girls in the society. So so that is the example of what a woman being in a strategic position can achieve, the impact that she can bring to the table. We also know, like Ibu Penny also mentioned earlier, the impact of women being facilitated will be much greater than just, for her benefit. For example, in the boardroom, corporate boardrooms, for example, if women are in a position, a strategic position to create decisions, then you will see 30% of increase in the revenue. And also, UN Women also has this study that says that if women's participation also ensure that women's participation in peace talk, for example, ensures a more sustainable and lasting peace, it's increase of the peace negotiation being upheld will be increased by 33% or more than 15 years. So from that angle, we can see that women can play such a crucial role. So with that in mind, then we at the Fight Foundation then decided to create an initiative. It's called Peace Village Initiative, that aims to facilitate women, that empower women to be more active, to be agents of peace in the societies. And thank you for Australian government for the support through the UN Women for these programs, and really appreciate the contribution that you have made to create peaceful communities in Indonesia. Can I just ask for the slide to be, sorry, can I ask the slide to be, yeah, okay. Move to the next page, please. Let me just, Ibu Penny has mentioned before about the Peace Village initiative. This is our initiative to promote prosperity, equality, and respect for diversity at the most basic level, which is at the village level. So we encourage the role of women as agents of peace. We put women on the center stage in trying to develop social cohesion and resilience in the community in the context of economy, social, and cultural aspects. So we have cross-cutting sectors that we've been using as our platforms. First one is sustainable economic empowerment. So we provide trainings on economic empowerment. We give access to credits through our microfinance mechanism. And also the second pillar is peace building mechanism. We encourage women to voice out their frustrations and to help them realize that what they do can really bring great impacts in the society. And I think women, as we all know, have this inherent sort of strength of or need or a drive to see more peace and to see more harmony in the society. So this is something that we'd like them to be more aware of, and something that we like them to take an active part in, to create a peaceful communities where they live. So the third element, of course, is women empowerment, in which women are being encouraged, being empowered, and through various mechanisms that I will explain later in more detail. Could you move the slide again? It's the next slide. Okay. So this is the sustainable economic empowerment part. Is the aim for that is to reduce economic gap and social inequality. We try the method of empowering the village, one product method. So we facilitate the women in creating products that has added values. For example, we help them with the packaging so that it has better chance of selling because of the added values they can sell for bigger price. We help them, for example, with the quality control of the product, and we help them also with marketings and the productions, etc. So we have a cooperative setting. It's called a peace-loving cooperative, in which women can become members of the cooperative to get access to microcredit. We also encourage savings as a mechanism for insurance. So if there's any bad things happen to the family, someone fell sick, for example, then they have this mechanism, they have this savings to help them getting through the bad times. And we also help to build infrastructure, albeit simple public facilities where people can hang out together and getting to know each other and having dialogues. Like what Ibu Penny said, is about communication. So we came from the notion that most peoples are actually quite provincial. They only hang out with people who they feel comfortable with, that usually it comes from similar backgrounds, whether that is religious backgrounds or social backgrounds, etc. We seldom see people actually doing cross groups activities unless it's being facilitated. So to encourage more perspectives of diversity, we try to nudge them into dialogues, and doing that by providing the public facilities, for example, a small gazebo, or a small a library for kids also to read, and for parents to be able to accompany their kids also, mothers can accompany their kids and doing activities there, to a more elaborate settings that provide economic benefits, such as creating a center of attraction in the village, so that people can go there and build like small moms and pop stores, around the area and producing products also to sell. So another thing that we ask our beneficiaries to adhere to is actually asking them to invest in the education of their children. So that is one commitment that we're asking them to uphold. You know, that they see that as an investment, that they see that as a way to break through the cycle of poverty that has been, befalling their families, for example, for generations. So if they want to join this group, this cooperative, for example, then they have to adhere to that commitment. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. So in the peace building mechanism, we try to strengthen women's groups and community elements resilience in the village to prevent conflict. We facilitated dialogues within groups of diverse religious and religious backgrounds, faith backgrounds, ethnicities. And there are 3 points that we address. You know, the first one is, of course, strengthening leadership and entrepreneurship skills through the women's business groups. And I think this is something that some women found a bit strange notion at first, because they're just not used to this idea that women can lead. And so by telling them that it is possible, that they have a big role to play, by giving them, by injecting a bigger degree of confidence into their lives, that they actually matters, then, you know, you see them being active, you see them taking more initiatives and creating all kinds of initiatives in the village that really results in a better prosperity for the village. Also, restoring local wisdom as pillar of the village society resilience. So there has been some kind of dividing notion that local wisdom has no place in our society, that it's either local wisdom or religious belief. So we try to encourage people to see within themselves where they're rooted as a source of strength, and for them to have a sense of identity, and for them then to move forward and spread their wings, because they've got a strong roots first. So the third point is facilitating capacity building for our beneficiaries in the village to build democratic, transparent, and accountable village governance. So it means that we try to encourage, especially the chief of the village, to incorporate women in the decision-making process. Usually this is through a women's task force or a women's working group that the village has, or the village musrembang, or the communication, forum of the village. So we try to build awareness not only in the women, but also in the men of the village as well, to give more rooms to women and convince them that it has a great benefit to the village overall. So far, we have been quite pleased with the results, and we see more and more commitments. We see more and more buy-ins from head of villages to support these initiatives. We've got mayors, we've got governors who also back these programs up. And what is, for me personally, what is more encouraging is all these comments from our beneficiaries. For example, we've got Ibu Habiba from Madura, when we first approached her out of the program, she said that she didn't realize that women have rights, but now she's actually thinking of running as a village chief. So, you know, you see kind of paradigm shift that is quite extreme in a way, you know, from one side, you know, where she didn't have any confidence in herself, and then to have that leap of faith, you know, to make that jump from trying to asserting her rights to be heard and to contribute to the society through joining in the local election. So that's an example of evidences that we found how this program has empowered women in day-to-day life that hopefully will bring great impacts in the society. So I think I'm just going to close my presentation with that, and I just welcome any questions after that. But I just want to thank once again, Ibu Penny Williams and also the Australian government for the support that we received through UN Women for the Peace Village program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bu Yeni. Thank you again, Ambassador Williams, for the insightful presentation. Certainly, there's a lot of things that we can talk about. And before we get started on the moderated discussion, I want to convey a few housekeeping rules for our student participants joining in the Zoom. Later on, we will have a question and answer session where you can directly use the raise hand feature on Zoom to ask your question to either of the panelists. And then I will be asking you to turn on your camera and then open your mic to pose the questions yourself to Ibu Yeni or Ambassador Williams. But firstly, Ambassador and Ibu Yeni, I'm wondering, you've been in this women empowerment field for so long. What has been the #1 consistent challenge that you encounter wherever you are in terms of achieving gender equality and women empowerment? Perhaps I can ask Ambassador Williams to start first.
So what I would say is just to reiterate, thanks for the question, just to reiterate the points I made in my opening remarks, and that is, I think we all, it's a human instinct to try and look for the one solution. There just must be a solution. And the reality is, to achieve gender equality is hard work. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It involves lots of conversations, difficult conversations. And like Ibu Yeni's projects, they have to be integrated. You can't just deal with women's economic empowerment unless you deal with the sort of leadership and empowering in terms of decision making. You just can't achieve something that's significant. It's generational, and so you need to be working for the longer term. So that's nothing. I think that when I first started in my role as ambassador for women and girls, my instinct was, well, there's, surely, all of us can find the solution, but really also talking to those women who are working in the grassroots. I mean, they will say people have to feel safe so that they can sell their things, and they need to have some agency around decision making to be able to do those things, and the same at senior level. So I think it's about addressing those things together and dealing with things slowly, having the conversation, talking about difficult things is really important. Accepting that people don't agree is really important as well, and that everyone's lived experience is different is really important. So being respectful in the conversations that you're having with men and women and with people in different countries is also incredibly important.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ibu Penny, Ibu Yeni, you can now have the floor. Ibu Yeni, it seems you're still muted.
Sorry. Yes, I have a bit of a problem. Yeah, I think like what Ambassador Penny had highlighted, I think it's this is a work that we all have to chip in. This is not something that we could just leave to 1 or 2 people in the society or leave it to the government. But this is something that we need to work together on. Just like what the father of education in Indonesia, the Ki Hajar Dewantara said, that there are 3 pillars of education. That's done in school, and then at home, and also in the society. So if you want to change the condition of women, then you need to utilize these three pillars, to educate the next generations to be more mindful that gender equality has a big impact in the society, that it will bring benefit to all, and that this is something that that is actually fits the demand of the time. We all know that empowering women brings great benefit to anyone, really, men and women. So this is something that is imperative that we should do, and we cannot wait, for that to happen. We need to keep on, striving for that to happen. And I think Indonesia and Australia have made great strides in that effort. We both countries have had female head of state, head of governments, and also at the moment, both foreign affairs ministers are women, also female, both, and we have Ambassador Hani. So, from that point of view, we have many inspiring figures that we could use to spotlight the need to give more position to women because of the impact that it creates in our society.
Thank you, Ibu Yeni. My next question, I think, is a question that's going to be really useful, especially for our young student participants who are still making their way in the world. We keep hearing statements such as, oh, we have to support women, give them positions and make them be part of the top of the ladder. But how can women advocate for themselves, especially in a space that is increasingly dominated by men, whether or not we like it? So we're wondering, what are your thoughts on that? And then what can our student participants do in terms of that?
What about Ibu Yeni first? Maybe Ibu Yeni first.
Okay, Bu Penny. Yeah, I don't think women should wait for men to serve the position on the platter for them. They should just go out and try to get them themselves. And as for certain positions being dominated by women, by men, for example, being dominated by men, we feel we feel crowded out, we feel left out in positions that were traditionally thought of as women's position. For example, the best chefs many of the best chefs are males, for example, or many of the great fashion designers are actually men also. So, but on the other hand, we also see that many of the great leaders of the world are female. So you see a gender balancing act happening there. We need to realize that no one is going to give it to us. We just have to try. Even if you have to try harder than men, you just have to try. Does it mean that you're going to succeed right away? No. It means that you're gonna fail, but when you fail, you will learn valuable lessons. And hopefully that will strengthen you to try again and again and again until you get to where your desire is, where your desired position is. Of course, women have it harder because we still have all these constraints. We still have all these problems that are not there, for men. They're not faced by men. If women are being too assertive, it's being called a, something bleep bleep. She's being called a arrogant, for example. But when men does it, they're called being authoritative, for example. They call being a leader. But when women do it, and they're being a BI something. So we still have all these biases, and it's not just among men, but also among women. Some women, especially in the older age women, that still tend to think that the responsibility of building a good family lies on the shoulder of women, and so they put a pressure on women also. So we still see women putting pressure on women as well. So what you do is, you just keep trying. You try to change the situation. And if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't happen for you, maybe it will happen for your children or for your grandchildren. After all, in Indonesia, if Raden Ajeng Kartini did not start her plight, her work for education for girls, we wouldn't be where we are now. So we have to always thank our earlier generations for the works that they have done. And so we must repay that kindness by also fighting for the next generation to have better life than us.
Thanks, Ibu Yeni. A very powerful statement. I will give the floor now to Ambassador Williams.
If only there was a simple answer. Yeah. Look, I think it's one of those where I agree with Ibu Yeni. I think there's so many ways that we all need to think about this and work together to overcome those things, whether this says systemic or individual, about what potentially holds us back in our own workplace or our own society. I said this on the panel the other day, and even more poignant this week because Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State, actually passed away this week, and she made the famous statement, "There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." And I do think that that's true in the sense of people like Ibu Yeni and I, who have been through these things, can see that we need to create the circumstances and the conditions so that younger women are able to fulfill their potential. I think part of that is talking about not just the systems, but our own experiences. And I think you'll find women are very open, very senior women, to talk about, as we did the other day on the panel with the two ministers, to talk about, the good, the bad and the ugly of being a senior woman and how you balance children and how did you do this. And I do think that women are more open and happy to have those conversations about what they've learned along the way. And I think that younger men and women find those very useful. So I try and do that with my team, to say I didn't do it perfectly. We do need to have those sorts of conversations. I do think that it's important to think about your networks and to build those networks at exercising agency. Now, for those of you at university, you have the privilege to be able to do that. I'm conscious of that. But even within the embassy here, we have a women in leadership network. Actually, it's the embassy and all our consulates, and it's Indonesian staff and Australian staff at different levels working in different roles. Sometimes they get speakers and sometimes they talk about issues, and sometimes they'll come to management and say, we think there's a problem, we need to do some more work on this. So I do think that coalitions, networks, however loose, even if you're just thinking about your own career and your own workplace, those are important things to do. I think sometimes, as I said before, it's also about having difficult conversations and knowing that it's difficult, that everyone's experience, if you're someone who doesn't have children, is a very different experience than if you do. And neither one is more valid than the other, and being respectful as you navigate those, and also trying things a bit differently. This is a shout out. If anyone follows my Twitter, we've advertised a driver for the embassy at the moment, and we specifically said women are encouraged to apply, because we're also looking at it the other way. We'd like to have more women who are drivers and more women who are working in our guard force. I recently have two women police who are attached to who work with me. So it's just kind of constantly looking at putting a gender lens over everything and seeing where you can move, who you can work with, who do you network with, who do you, listening to people, having conversations, and just keeping on working through the issues, rather than necessarily thinking there's going to be sort of one particular solution. There is something that I do think, and I'm not sure if I have the opportunity to mention it here or others, from my own experience working in the international space, also in the development space, but also in workplaces, it's really important to have data. So even in your own workplace, if people are looking at levels of promotion, levels of opportunity, levels of those sorts of things, data collection and making the business case actually gets you through the door, because, and then you can talk about the justice, the sort of justice side of it, but the data and collection of data and actually what you're trying to solve, what you're trying to deal with is incredibly important. We found that in our own ministry when we were seeking to increase to develop a women in leadership program, and the first thing was the data collection, and it's sometimes not what you expect, but you have to have the data, and without the data you can't map it forward. When you have the data you can map it forward, and then you've got to measure and constantly measure. What are we, if we're trying to increase the number of women in senior positions, what's our baseline, where are we trying to go, and keep on measuring. What did we try, did that work? No, it didn't, let's try something else.
Thank you, Ambassador. A really powerful message. And I think one thing that we can all learn from this advice from Ibu Yeni and Ibu Penny is that we have to change the narrative in society, but first and foremost, we have to change our own mindset and the paradigm that we inherit, perhaps, and just take that leap of faith and space. Usually women, especially young women, they're afraid to take space, but you should know that you have the right to take space, and you should be occupying that space through your contributions for your country or for the world. We will now be taking questions from the floor. So if there's anyone in the Zoom room who would like to pose a question, please do so by using the raise your hand feature on the Zoom. But in the meantime, while everybody's getting ready in the Zoom, I will be reading some questions from the YouTube chat room. First, we have a question from Universitas Nasional Novrel Esa Yubel. In order to prevent and overcome the violence against women, how can we empower non-state actor roles like Wahid Foundation or other NGOs and society? And then we also have another question coming from Hasanuddin University, Aisha. How has the effort been for both countries to have the same proportion of employees and pay based on gender? So the first question first, perhaps I will give it to Ibu Yeni.
Okay, so I think the work that we've done is actually is also focusing on the issue of violence against women. It's part of the awareness training that we try to get the women to understand that they shouldn't take anything that any discriminations, any violent acts against them, that they have the rights to be treated and to feel safe, in their family, in their society, but they also have the ability to prevent like violent acts happening in their communities if they want to, by building a working groups together, like building a mechanism to prevent it, by building awareness amongst all of the village residents, for example, building more awareness that this is something that is not acceptable, and basically creating new norms in the village, that it is not that violence against anyone, really, whether it's men or women, are not acceptable. So that's something that we have, that we is one of the focus on the programs that we're trying to do. So I would like to also extend my invitations to any of the students if they want to participate in and be volunteers in these programs. We've got universities quite keen in joining programs as well, as part of the KKN. So if anyone wants to come here, and in any of our villages, there are about 30 villages now, and who wants to see firsthand and to see how the Peace Village program works, then by all means, we are more than happy to take on volunteers. We are quite glad, actually, because you, especially the millennials, the students of educated students of universities, you have something to contribute to its residents. You have, you have the privilege of having a higher education that I believe will be a great contribution to the villages, if you so would like to do. So that would be the on the issue of that. And I think the second question, Ibu Penny probably would be able to.
It was about the gender pay gap, I think. Is that right?
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. I'm happy to answer it because Australia has a gender pay gap. We have a gender pay gap of 13.8%. So that means that a gender pay gap is the difference between the average earnings of women and men in the workforce overall. It's not the difference between my pay and the man sitting next to me. It's the annual, it's over the workforce generally. So that's an area where Australia's been working really hard, and once again it goes to data. So there's an agency called the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, and every employer, it's like a regulator and a reporter of data. So every organisation, every business that employs over 100 people, has to report some basic data. It's not complicated, including their salaries and their gender breakdown. And it's one of those areas that the government is working really hard to reduce the gender pay gap. So it has come down, had a bit of a blip through COVID because there's a disproportionate impact on women. Women tend to be in sort of more casual, like Indonesia, it's the same in Australia, sort of casual employment, and the sectors that have been affected by COVID. So it's really, if anyone's interested, because it really is a good explanation and very carefully done about how to collect data to affect change. The website is Workforce Gender Equality Agency.gov.au. It explains that it's a government agency. So the gender pay gap is influenced by several factors: discrimination and bias in hiring and pay decisions, women and men working in different industries and different jobs, with female-dominated industries attracting lower wages, women's disproportionate share of unpaid care and domestic work, lack of workplace flexibility to accommodating caring and other responsibilities, especially in senior roles, and women's greater time out of the workforce, impacting career progression and opportunities. So gender pay gaps are an internationally recognised measure to actually of women's position in the economy. And so it's one area that the Australian government is really working carefully on to decrease the percentage difference. It's hard work, and something like COVID really throws it around. But it's definitely, if anyone is interested in that, I really would encourage you to look at that website of that agency, because they do such a good job in data collection. As I said, it's all about data. What are we measuring? What are we trying to achieve? And keeping on going back to measure it.
Thank you, Ambassador. So there we have it, two opportunities for all of you to participate in the women empowerment. First, by volunteering with the Wahid Foundation, and then secondly, by accessing that website, which we'll be happy to send over to all of the participants registered today. Now, we have a lot of questions coming in from YouTube, but I'd first like to give the opportunity to those in the Zoom who would like to raise their hand and pose a question. I think earlier, Ihyar Wahyudi raised your hand, so I'll be happy to give the floor to Ihyar. Ihyar, can you hear us okay? It seems that you're still muted.
Yeah. Thank you for Ms. Tamara. I'm Iroyudi from the FPCI chapter of Bilateral University. My question is for Mrs. Penny Williams. There's collaboration between Australia and Indonesia called the Partnership for Australia-Indonesia Research, or PAIR, which is a program organized by the Australia-Indonesia Center. What I know is that one of these programs is implemented in South Sulawesi province, namely Makassar City. My question is whether in this research program, Australia and Indonesia also provide assistance in the form of service and education to parties who are the object of research on efforts to gender equality and women's empowerment. Thank you.
So I'm not sure I completely heard the question, and I'll follow up on the specifics of the work in South Sulawesi. But if I can just say that our work on gender cuts across all aspects of our collaboration and partnership with Indonesia, not just in education and research, but in police, in security, in all aspects, and in terms of our foreign policy, trade and investment. So that's why we have Invest in Women, the sorts of work that the two women foreign ministers do together as well. So definitely within the education space, we do a lot of work in terms of scholarships and collaborative research in the gender space, including very practical training for officials and NGOs who are working with with women's organisations, but also people who are doing PhDs. But in relation to I think you're talking about the consortium and what it's doing in South Sulawesi, I'll take that on notice and we'll follow up for you through FPCI.
Thanks, Ambassador. We have two questions that I received through the chat room, which is first from Dewi. Dewi would like to ask, I found a lot of discrimination and unequal gender parity in the school, in my school. What should students do to implement gender equality in their school environment? And then secondly, a question from Kai Wilkinson from Deakin University. Could you talk about how men can support women's equality and empowerment so that it's not only women doing it for themselves? Ibu Yeni, you'd like to take a step on that first? Because I understand you have to leave early, unfortunately.
Yes, Esther, I just got this notification that the Minister of Tolerance, Shahna Hayan, just requested to meet. So I'm afraid I will have to. That's a request that I cannot turn down. So I will have to leave earlier than scheduled. Let me just try to answer the questions first. So the questions about at schools that there's a discrimination at school. I'm not quite sure which in what context the discrimination happens, but if discrimination is systematic, then this is something that needs to be addressed properly. If something the issue has to be raised, and I think you need to talk to the could be the dean or the rectors, if there is a discrimination. But if it's just about, for example, competitions, and then that girls just do not get the parts, and I'm not diminishing that that condition, but it's harder to argue that it is a discrimination. So I would encourage all of the female students to be more active and try that well first. And if there is still discrimination, structural discriminations, then raise the issues to the authority in the school authority. I found that in many settings, actually, women are simply lacking the glass ceiling syndrome, getting over them, in a sense that some women simply believe that they're not fit for the position, that that this is a position that they shouldn't strive for, that that they don't want to take risks. So women inherently has this less affinity for risk. We are much more a consensus maker rather than risk taker. And of course, being consensus maker has great benefits in a sense that it can create more harmonies with the societies. It can, women can play bigger roles in trying to bring different parties to the table together and encouraging dialogues, etc. But the downside to that is sometimes that women think too much, girls think too much of what others think about them. So they don't want to take any risks for fear that they will be ridiculed, that people will look down at them, that they will make mistakes, and etc. So I think the one thing that we need to realize that we will make mistakes anyway in life. We will fail anyway. So let's just fail. Let's just make mistakes and learn from them. Because by learning from our mistakes, by failing, then we can get a step closer to success. So that's the first question. Just go out there, take the risk, make mistakes, and repeat if necessary until you achieve your objectives in life. So what about men being in support of gender equality? Well, my father was one such man. I grew up in a family where we don't talk about women equality because we practice it. From early age, I saw my father washing dishes together with my mom, helping with the cleaning up of the house and helping my mom. They both were very poor at the beginning of their marriage, and my mom would. They have this simple. My dad was just starting his career as a teacher in a local school, and to support the family income, my mom then sold peanuts in plastic bags. Homemade peanuts, fried peanuts. So she would fry the peanuts and my dad would put them in plastics. And then in the morning, he would bring them and put them in the neighboring stores to sell. So that's the kind of collaborations that they have, to support the family income. So we're seeing this from early age, from our childhood. So for us, gender inequality is something that is foreign, because what we see at home is actually gender equality. So it is possible for men to support gender equality because it will bring great benefit, not only to women, but also to men.
Thanks, Ibu Yeni. I've been advised that before, giving the floor back to Ambassador Williams, that we take a picture together first because Ibu Yeni really needs to leave. So I kindly invite all the student participants at the Zoom to open their camera. And then on my cue, I will be taking the photo. So if you can please open your cameras, all right, perfect. And make sure to smile. Okay, picture taken in 3, 2, 1. Another one. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you so much, Ibu Yeni. We wish you the best of luck for your meeting.
Thank you so much. And thank you for understanding. I'm really sorry, but Ibu Penny, I mean, she's a superwoman. She can answer all kinds of questions, much, much better than I do. So please bombard her with hard questions.
Certainly we will.
Anything. Such a strong woman.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Have a good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ambassador Williams, would you like to answer the 2 questions previously posed by the student?
So I think the first one, I would agree with Ibu Yeni. I mean, it's a complicated situation, and it goes to what I said earlier about finding allies, finding groups, finding people you can work with, so that you can make the case about what's happening in a particular school or in a particular university. You need to always feel like you're supported to be able to do that, and sometimes the change will be little by little, and you won't be able to see the change until you look back, and sometimes it will be the change for others. But I think increasingly across the world there is a sense that younger women in particular have room to call it out when they see things that are either discriminatory or harassing or abusive. So it's little by little, but I do think there's a bit more room there, and we should really take the opportunity to do that. But I do think it's part of building your own alliances and working out who in the senior positions are able to leverage for you. On the question of men participating, I do think that men do play an important role in the issues of women's political empowerment, economic empowerment, and also keeping women safe. And we can have really, particularly standing up against violence, it's quite important to have leaders, and I'm thinking of faith leaders, people in communities who are highly respected, who can actually use their pulpit or who can use the respect they have in a community to deliver quite basic messages around that it's not, it's not, to be strong in your religion means that you don't hit women, it doesn't matter what religion that you are, but I've seen that work really well in countries where, in churches, where church leaders have really kind of made a point, and I think across religions, being able to get male faith leaders, but also in Australia, sports leaders. But can I just say that, and often men in uniform as well, like working with the police, working is quite important in particular communities. It's quite a huge educative piece there as well for encouraging men to do that. I do think it's really important that when men do get involved, that they need to listen. So I have been involved in some women's in leaderships group where the men tend to speak first and have got a few ideas about how to resolve the issue. So it's quite hard for them to sit and listen to women's experience. And a lot of it is about listening to personal experience, lived experience, to actually understand what people are talking about if they haven't lived it themselves. So yes, I agree. I said that in my opening remarks, really important role for men as allies in this. I gave an example at one of the panels I was on with Ibu Yeni last week about one of the issues we found. This is quite a small issue, but an issue that we found in our own workplace was that women felt embarrassed when they left because they had to do childcare or their child had something at school. So we encouraged men when they were doing those things to leave loudly, so that when they were leaving to go to a school concert or to go to parent teacher or to pick up their children or to take a child to the doctor or to take their mum to the doctor, that they should say it very loudly. I am leaving to go and pick up my children. I have to take my mother to the doctor, so that people could see, so to normalise it and for women not to feel guilty when they were doing it. That was actually a normal part of life, to take your mother to the doctor or to pick up your children from school. So it's those little sort of quite practical things that you can actually adapt, and it can actually make a real difference.
Thank you, Ambassador. And this is another question that I think everybody is curious to know. What is your view on being the first women Australian ambassador to Indonesia? And what does women empowerment and women in leadership mean in the context of Indonesia-Australia bilateral relations?
So, as I said, gender equality goes to everything in the relationship, whether it's foreign policy, development partnership, our economic relationship, and we both work together really closely on those issues, and we work together closely with other countries in the region, and we also work internationally, and our two foreign ministers are really leaders of that engagement. So, and it's kind of an amazing time to watch two foreign ministers really driving that agenda. In terms of my own position, I'm so proud to be Australian ambassador to Indonesia. I was an exchange student here a long time ago, so the idea that I could come back as an ambassador is pretty amazing. And on reflection, I probably didn't ever think that when I first started in my career that would be something that I could aspire to. But over time, things have changed, and hopefully it also provides a sort of model for others that in our senior ambassadorial positions, it's quite normal for a woman to hold those. And as I said in my opening remarks, that I'm not, I'm the first, but I won't be the only, and that others, will follow in my footsteps. And from the wonderful team who work with me, I can see that there's many people who would be ready to take on that role. But it is something to it's something to celebrate. I mean, it's something to say, this is kind of amazing, but at the same time, it's also to say, well, it took so long. It took so long. We had our first woman ambassador, and the fact that, I was our first woman High Commissioner Ambassador to Malaysia. There's a lot of firsts as we increase the number of our women in senior positions, but there's not very many positions that we have overseas as ambassador where we haven't already had a woman, and we have a woman foreign minister and we have a woman head of our ministry as well. So, and we also have a very active Women in Leadership program to increase the number of women in senior positions, the number of women ambassadors, but looking just at what we look like more inclusively as we represent Australia. So people of all sorts of backgrounds, including Indigenous Australians. I mean, it was kind of an amazing moment when we had our first woman Indigenous ambassador to Spain a couple of years ago. That's when you know you really are kicking goals in terms of making us look more like, more like the people who we represent. So I think we're making great strides, but as I said, it took a lot of work and a lot of data and a lot of commitment within the department to get the leadership on board, and then driving it forward, having conversations, not always getting it right, having to rethink. And then, you get to a place where we have sort of 40% of our, it's 40 something percent, almost 50% of our ambassadors are women.
Can I add to that, Esther?
Please, Pat.
Yeah. So you can regard me as a replacement for Yenny. There's a lot of women in me anyways. But I was a diplomat, and when I was ambassador, I had a lot of female diplomats as well. And I'm a lecturer and have female students. What I noticed, I'm not saying this because this is International Women's Day, and I'm sorry, Ray, for all the male in the room, for me saying this, but there's something about women in that they seem to be more systematic and organized in their thinking. When I read reports or draft speeches, I compare the men and the male. The men are usually convoluted. The ideas are all over the place. And the draft that I get or the reports I get from women are usually more tidy, more organized, more systematic. And the same thing when I grade the work of my students. I know there are a lot of students here. For some reason they just things are more tidy in the way women organize their thoughts. So I just want to bring that out there, and maybe Ray, you would agree with me, because the stuff that I get for you are all over the place sometimes, and the stuff I get from Esther are a lot more cleaner, right? Yeah.
But Dino, I'm sure you would agree with me that throughout your career, I mean, I think until relatively recently, I think that if a role of a diplomat is to get a feel for something, to influence, to understand, to explain, I definitely know that perhaps my predecessors, when I had been High Commissioner in Malaysia, were not talking to women. They just weren't. They didn't engage with UMNO Wanita. They didn't engage, but there might have been a little bit, but not kind of systematically. So you can't sort of explain a whole country or a whole society if you're only dealing with one part of that, and then perhaps some women leaders. So I think the starting point can be a bit different. I used to joke, I didn't play golf, but I knew a lot of women. So it just gave me a kind of sense of a whole different group that perhaps people hadn't even been talking to. And we all know that in all of our countries, women voters can really make a difference. So if you're not talking to sort of women in grassroots political parties, if you're not talking to, those sort of people, then you're not getting the full picture.
Yeah. Can I just add just another small thing to add to that? I think that's a very important statement. Margaret Thatcher, I watched read her biography. I think she was the kind of leader who thought she had to be men, or even more men, to lead a group of men, a male cabinet, right? And I think what I want to say, especially to the young women here, you don't need to be men. You don't need to be like men to lead men, right? You don't need to be even more men than men to be effective. You can be woman and be strong. You can be woman and be firm. You can be women and be fair and compete. So I mean, one of the best examples is Sri Mulyani. She's comfortable in any context. She can compete with anybody nationally and internationally. She leads men, women, thousands of people effectively. And she's all woman, right? So I just want to put it out there, just in case any one of you saw the Margaret Thatcher movie and thought you have to be like men or more men to lead men. Yeah, you don't need to be.
Although, Pat Dino, I will tell you one thing, a very amazing woman boss I once had, who was very senior, said that perhaps that women tend to kind of, because they tend to do that thing of trying to reconcile and solve problems like that, that sometimes you need to, even if it's not within you, you need to do the pretend angry, and people will be so shocked.
Yes.
So you have to build yourself up to it and just do it. And everyone was so shocked that it will actually have more resonance than almost anybody else.
True. I want to see you do that to me one day.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Williams and then Padino for that really important interventions. We have come to the end of today's discussion, but certainly this should not be the end of the conversation on women empowerment. We should continue to carry this baton in the future months, future years, and especially seeing the students, young women here become future Yeni Wahids and future Ambassador Penny Williams. Certainly, please do that. We look forward to seeing that day. I look forward to seeing that day. And let me just end by quoting Gloria Steinem, a world-renowned feminist, that the story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist or no anyone organizations, but to the collective efforts of all who care about human rights. So with that, let me close today's discussion. Thank you everybody who has joined from Zoom, Universitas Bosowa, Mataram, and Deakin University, and for everyone who has also supported this discussion on YouTube chat room. Thank you. I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Esther. Yeah.
Thanks, Esther. Thanks for the great chairing as well.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Bye-bye.